Welcome to NasStars, the Nasstar podcast, bringing you the conversations you want to hear from the front line of tech news.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the NasStars podcast. We have two good topics again for you today. The first one is digital literacy and what do we need to know when we go into the workplace. The second one is about going cloud native, which all sounds a bit like there's kind of like a film title in there somewhere, isn't there? Going cloud native. And to talk through this, we've got Ricardo Meechan, who is an M365 and Azure consultant. And we have Ash Ward, who is M365 consultant. Welcome both. And I suggest we get straight into the weeds of this. Okay, topic number one, gents, if you are ready for this, digital literacy. So there was an article published by the BBC, very short article actually, on digital literacy. And it sort of probed the questions as to, obviously the working world has changed an awful lot over the years, and is being this is very hard to say, digitally literate, something that is an absolute must within the working world now. And if it is, how do we get people's levels of literacy up? So, floor is yours. Do we need it?
100%, absolutely 100%. Obviously, like we've kind of discussed previously, more around if your job is more sort of, say, manual labouring and kind of like manufacturing, where you don't really need to touch any digital devices, etc., then I would probably say not as much, but you still need some level where, say, your timesheet systems, you know, your standard HR systems that you use on a day-to-day basis. You've got the likes, I'm going to go into the Teams world here, you've got the likes of Teams and sort of and Viva, etc. People are only just seeing these sort of products coming to life, and they're actually across most workplaces. And so you still need to have some form of sort of knowledge around what you're doing, because this is not just like using Excel or Word, etc. So I think, yeah, definitely 100%. And like my sort of 18-month-old girl, she's the same thing. She's using a phone, etc. And I feel if you don't provide the phone or the tablet, etc., you kind of holding them back now, because everything is moving that way. So yeah.
So just picking up on that then, what do we define as being digitally literate? Because you mentioned the Office suite, right? And my son uses parts of that at school. He's like year 10. So he, knows his round of stuff, his way around some of the basic sort of Office suite apps. But you were talking about the potentially sort of, factory work or somewhere where you may not be in touch with, that sort of Office piece. And are we looking at, if you are a shift worker, you're still potentially receiving tech with, this is your shift rota, you think Microsoft Shifts. Where do we draw that line on what literacy is? Is it actually just being able to use a phone to look at your shift patterns?
I think, Pete, on that one, just, that digital literacy is natural to people now, because rather than what it used to be like, you had to be trained up in a word processor or, doing a computing function. Now it's sort of naturally you learn because of the tools around you. An example is farmers. You've got tractors now that are using digital tools, global positioning to actually do the job. And, as daft as that sounds, we've got farmers now that need to be digitally literate to do their job, which came naturally based on the products that they've been using. The same goes for schools, and you've got tools like Minecraft. Technically it's an education tool, even though it is also a game for kids. But schools are using that to learn, the digital world.
Yeah, well, actually, we haven't got farmers using those sort of technologies around where I live in the middle of East Anglia, where it's a huge farming community, because apparently there's been a massive spree of people stealing all of the technology
And
out
that
of the big tractors and
that's why I love
machinery.
about it. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. It was on the news, and the point is that this is because it's worth a lot of money. It's natural now for these farms to be using high technology to do their jobs.
yeah, we've
So
had
it's
something like
all over. It's everywhere.
40 major thefts in the last 2
Yeah,
weeks or something,
scary.
and they've like taken the entire roof out of
Yep.
this machinery. So it's a good point, though. So I mean, it's starting to wonder whether or not there are actually any roles out there now that really don't come into touch with tech at all. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, you look at sort of care in the community and people who sort of potentially go around. They're logging their visits on apps on their phones. So
Mhm.
I think it's interesting in the sense that I think it was Chris here said it on one of the previous podcasts. It's like tech is in absolutely everything we do now. But one of the things I find quite interesting is, and I've actually put in a request. I think we're going to do a special on systematic failures in technology and at the education layer, because if you look back at it, you know, as I said, my son is looking to use some of the apps and stuff from Office Suite. Surely that whole digital literacy piece, don't we just at school just train people in how to do Word documents and take information out of something and then put it into a presentation, albeit using maybe some of the power platform stuff that's around these days and things, and make it actually a bit more meaningful for people, so that it doesn't matter what you go into, you've got that base understanding of what technology is and how it fits.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with that completely, and I've got a bit of an example recently, which, if we're going back to the education world,
Mm.
is sort of the nursery where my daughter's going at the moment. Is they were saying that a lot of the sort of early years and preschool, etc., the teachers or the tutors, etc., are using apps. They're just using frameworks that the government is providing. It's an application-based system, and you look on this flip side, it's also quite detrimental in the education world, because now potentially your teachers are losing that emotional touch and understanding how to actually develop a child and bring them on and educate them without technology. And the nursery was actually bringing up points with us where they were saying, we want to bring someone in who can teach without technology, but then use technology to enhance that experience rather than relying on that. So I think it's definitely needed, but it's coming to the point where it's also becoming you're relying on it as well. But we need to kind of try and not blur that too much, otherwise, like you say, you lose touch and you can't speak to humans. You're becoming a bit of a robot essentially. And yeah, that's kind of where I think it is going there.
Yeah, and I guess there is an element of the more automated that things become, and the school that Ben goes to, you've got a different platform for homework on this, different platform for homework on that. If I look at them actually in a critical eye, I would be rating them 3 or 4 out of 10 in their effectiveness, because actually you look at what he's doing and you just go, that's really bad user experience. Same question straight underneath, just worded slightly differently and things like that. There's no engagement in that. It's a tick box exercise you have to go through. So I think we want to inspire the next generations, right? To go through. But I guess there's also we're talking about kids here, but there's also, I guess, a sort of a divide throughout the country, in the sense that I got into computers quite early. I'm older than you two, so but that's been sort of part of my life right the way through. But there's other chunks of society that never got that exposure, and there's some coming through now with the cost of living, can't afford the devices at home, etc., don't necessarily have the amount of devices at school. How do we bridge that gap? Because really, they still need the skills too. And as much as the technology on your phone is good, I don't think that is the same as digital literacy.
That's a definite worry that even personally we've got in the house, Pete. That there's applications that are required to do the kids' homework, and it's built on specific platforms like iOS, and we're having to do that on our phone because the platform that my son uses is Android. And it's little simple things like that, and it sounds easy to say to all the kids and the parents, hey, here's this app, you use this going forward, but there's going to be a lot of families out there that are not going to have those tools, and sadly not be able to afford it, especially with the way the economy is going just now. So how do you make sure that everybody's sort of on that same level with digital literacy when it actually requires people to own and purchase tool sets to do that?
Okay, so we don't normally mention brand names. I'm going to break the rule here. No, don't look at me like that. I'm going to break it. There is a TV advert that's been going around for a while, and I think it sort of crops up every so often. And I think it's Barclays who do these. Is it Digital Eagles or something like that, where you can they will teach you how to use computers and stuff. Is it? It shouldn't be down to a bank or a corporate to train people, but is that what we're going to end up doing? Do we think? Do we need some of the vendors to create online courses that teach people through the basics?
It depends if the government and the public spending is actually directing this digital literacy improvement. At the same time, it's very costly to do that. So that's why you've got private organizations that are helping out, that can assist with that. Going forward, there should be a larger standard of, like a digital literacy standard that is adhered by every organization, every location within the country. And I think that's the problem just now, that every area is doing it differently. So you don't have that standardized product or application or service.
So you say it's expensive though. If you look at the three big players out in the in the cloud world, your Googles, your Amazons, your what's the other one? Oh, Microsoft. That's right. That's the one. Yeah,
Azure, I think it's called.
But a lot of the content from Microsoft land is already free. It's already available. Is it not just a case of structuring an online course to say digital literacy, it's free, run through this, we'll give you online access to the apps during that training course? Billy Boots.
Yeah, I mean that's quite a good point there. Like you say, from the Microsoft world, everything's free in terms of learning. But the issue with that is it's not targeting everybody. You've got different ways of learning. Just reading is not enough. Someone dictating to you on a video is not enough. And that's where obviously the school and sort of education sector need to potentially be upping the game in the digital literacy kind of part, because you need people to be sort of taught the sort of standard tools that we're all using on a day-to-day basis at the moment. Teams came out of nowhere and became a standard across most schools, most hospitals, most businesses. It just came out of nowhere. And having schools bringing them up and saying, this is how you use this software and this is what you can use it for, and this is how you surf the web in a safe way, that kind of stuff. I think that needs to be pushed more into the schools, because they're there to teach and sort of they've got different teaching styles.
That brings me on to a different point then, which is obviously in the corporate world, adoption and change management is hugely important. You're rolling out new technology. We're going to do adoption and change management for you afterwards to make sure that you understand how you use the tool, how it's going to make your life better, yada yada yada. But I was talking to my good lady, and she was saying that when she worked in the college, probably about 6 years ago, there was a course that taught you how to use the apps and how to extract data and put it into something more meaningful and do all this kind of thing. And it was part of the it counted towards your GCSE type outcome. And then it got downgraded because the universities, I think it was the universities, didn't see it, or the exam boards didn't see it as being important enough. And because it didn't count towards the college's stats and standing, it's basically been dropped. Which sounds to me like a completely wrong direction.
Yeah, literally, it is, and we're all sat here. There's three of us sat here. We're in front of monitors. We've got phones. We've got tablets. We've got laptops. We've got desktops. We're probably all we've got kids. Have got laptops, tablets, etc. It's not going anywhere. So people do need to be taught these things, and it needs to be made more of a mandatory type thing, because you think of employability. You've got probably 98% of jobs out there. You could probably look on all job sites. They'll require some form of understanding how to use computers, apps, devices. But you're just your standard job, because those companies will use those systems. So you'll need to know how to use them. So you'll have to have some sort of understanding of how do I navigate and collaborate with employees, and how do I fill in my employee records, etc. All those kind of things. Yeah, it's
so. Last question from me before we move on to topic number 2. Then, simple answer. What age do we start? Did you? I knew I would be able to say it. That thing. From what's the appropriate age to start educating kids at?
That's a good question, based on the fact that I've got a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. In our opinion, it was always that a 2-year-old would be far too young to be looking at anything, from a digital perspective or using digital tools. However, naturally, based on what he's seeing around him, the parents using these tools, and my 6-year-old, he now knows how to go into my kid's tablet, swipe up, click on a button to watch a TV show or something on that. And that just happened, and you're watching it and you're like, did we teach him to do that? No, we didn't. He's just picked that up. So from an age, do you take that away and say he's too young? Or do you go, hang on a minute, he's really, really learning the digital evolution of the world naturally, and what's he going to be like when he's 6, that my other 6-year-old is? Because he wasn't doing that at 2, because he never had the tools. So I don't know if there's an actual minimum age. Obviously, there's certain products or services you would limit, but having access to a tool at such a young age I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Ash?
Yeah.
What you said, is it?
No, I really quite like that answer, because it's pretty much the same here. Say, the 17-month-old, and she can go on my phone. She, we've got these educational games, matching colours and sizes and all things that bring you up in the world of understanding the basics of how to navigate life in a very easy, interactive way that she's just absorbed like a sponge. And the sort of, I'd say, you sort of 12-month onwards, where they're starting on the feet, starting to explore, they're a sponge, an absolute sponge. So getting technology and getting the digital, seeing this pane of glass where they're seeing things moving, it feels that's probably right to start as early as you can in some aspects, just because when they get to 3, 4 and start going into school, the teachers are using these devices. Your parents, parents are already using them. So yeah, I think as early as possible, but I don't think there's a defined age. I think it's when the child looks or feels ready, because they've just started exploring it naturally rather than being forced upon it.
Cool. Nice. Right. Now let's maybe talk about something a little more serious. So let's have topic number 2.
So yes, what are cloud native services? That is something that we get asked a lot just now from our customers. And what we're seeing now is this direction of our customers who are moving away from the on-premise world that they've had for so many years, which is perhaps slowing them down with innovation and technology, and are now looking to use those sort of latest and modern products that are in the public and private and hybrid clouds. So what's your thoughts on that?
I might throw this at Ash because I've got a lot of thoughts on this, so I might just let Ash have a go before I just get my cup of tea, settle down with a packet of biscuits, and just rant for.
my thoughts on this. So you've got the likes of the big three, Microsoft, Amazon, Google. They kind of know what they're doing. Let's call those kind of it's hyperscale. They're the hyper cloud sort of providers. Yep. And then you've got the likes of, say, other organizations that are marketing, say, we're providing a cloud service. But what really is the cloud? The cloud is a globally scaled product. It's patch management is not going through and installing Windows updates and manually installing things. It's not having things, people manually doing things in the background to get things up and running. It's automated, it's scalable, it integrates with lots of other platforms and lots of public platforms, not just internal systems. But then you've got the sort of the likes of the companies that may say we sell cloud, but actually we've got 4 servers in our garage and we sell the cloud. But you don't, because now sort of you've got weekly patch management schedules and your services are going down on these days. That's not the cloud, even though the definition of the cloud is just computers elsewhere.
Yeah. So there's a great T-shirt which I'm very tempted to buy, but it's proper geeky stuff. It's like there's no such thing as cloud. It's just geeks? Yeah. We are geeks, yes. We're fortunate we get paid to be geeks, right? But there's a T-shirt that basically says there's no such thing as cloud. It's just somebody else's computer. Which I think is exactly what you're coming to. And there was a phrase I heard sort of recently, which is absolutely fantastic. They're calling the phrase pretend cloud. And so I think we do need to probably just sort of set the benchmark a little bit at the beginning, because you're absolutely right. There are organizations that are saying, yeah, use our cloud. But the reality of it in my head is that you buy a service, what somebody does in the background to upgrade, maintain, etc., that is not even part of the conversation. It's always available. You're always using it, and there's nothing. So you've got to be kind of slightly generous. But if somebody's talking to you about taking down the environment whilst they do some changes, etc., that's not cloud.
No.
So there's 2 parts. There's one is the big hyperscalers, but also you look at what they've done is that they have built services that you just go, I just don't one of them, or I was going to stick that over there. I'm going to do this. So it's very different.
You have both hit the nail on the head with that one. Pretend cloud is something I've also heard, and unfortunately I've seen it as well. And a good example, it's really good because it's a good example of some customers or partners who might do a lift and shift from on premises. So what they're just essentially doing is, like you say, you're moving it from one data center to another. Everything's still exactly the same. You still get the same security risks, the same patching risks. Nothing's really changed. And of course, that's why we think of things like cloud native services. We are using the built-in scalability, the security, and the management from those cloud native services, and trying to, or when I say trying, it takes time, to migrate the customer's existing services into those native services. Now, that is the difference from a lift and shift and modernization of a customer's environment. And that's, I don't want to say that's the real cloud and the other one's pretend, but that's where we're trying to direct our customers.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are use cases where having your kit in somebody else's data center is absolutely fine, right? Okay.
Yes.
So we're not talking about that. We are talking about, I think when we're talking about the pretend cloud piece, for me, that is very much where you take a third-party application, drop it into the likes of Azure, and you're not using the function that is already there provided by that hyperscaler.
A good example of that would be SQL servers and Exchange servers. You've already got that running on-prem. You do a lift and shift, and suddenly then you're running that on someone else's tin. But yet there's other products and services that you could be leveraging instead of those on-premises services. And you're absolutely right. We do sadly see that still, but most customers are now getting that understanding that they need to be using the more
So
native services.
There's two angles I'd like to follow up then on that. One is what drives an organization to just take the on-prem world and drop it into something like one of the cloud platforms, and the other one has gone straight out of my mind. Well, I can't remember what it was. So start with that one while I think about what the other one was again.
Well, on the first one, I think it's more of a concern or worry, and we don't want to break anything, and of course you've got customers who actually don't know their environment because it's been in for so long. People have come and go, documentation has got lost. So you're like, right, that is still running. Let's not touch it. But we need to move out of this data center for other reasons, maybe cost or something. So what they're physically doing is, that lift and shift, but not touching a single thing. And it's trying to then tell customers that, you're still running your business the same way as before. It's just somewhere else. You're still going to have to pay for it, but you're not getting any new features or the latest and greatest in patch and security and risk management,
So is it when you take old tech, when you take systems from on-prem and put them in the cloud, doesn't that introduce potential security risks? Oh, who are you pointing at? I can't see.
I
was going to say let a Ash jump in there if you wanted.
No, I was going to say, yeah. So I was just quickly go back to what you were just saying there. Essentially, the bottom line, what kind of Rico was pointing out, is most organizations in the lift and shift model are forced out of it because, like you're saying, data center contracts coming up to an end, or some business decision where some piece of software is coming to an end. It's usually an expiry or a decommissioning or something like that. But back to kind of the security point of view is, anything with a wire that's connected to the internet, there's a security risk. We all know this. What's the best security? Just not plugging it into the internet, kind of. but you've got no risk. Then obviously you've got physical risk, etc. People physically walking up to this piece of tin. But going to the cloud, yes, it does introduce security challenges, but it also shifts people's traditional security mindset and makes people feel quite uncomfortable because all of a sudden they feel we don't have control of this anymore. We've lost control. But yet you're paying someone X millions of pounds or thousands of pounds to do that for you, who are certified, who have all the experts, possibly even more than your own organization. So you've just got to say, we put our entire crown jewels in your hands.
Yeah, I get where you're going. It wasn't quite what I meant. If you migrated a virtual machine from on-prem as is into the likes of Azure, whereas you've potentially got a secure model to work from and landing zones and all that sort of stuff, you're potentially actually just introducing gaping holes because you're treating it in the same mindset. That's really what I was sort of getting at.
So yeah, okay, I see. So what you've essentially got is you've got the lift and shift model, but you're refactoring the components around that VM you've moved. So as Rico was saying, the modernization aspect, which is refactoring and potentially taking an application that's been there for 20 years and rewriting the code and bringing it into different services, is the way that we would all really like to do, because you're getting the scalability, the performance, the reliability. But dragging that VM literally from your on-prem environment, throwing it into Azure, potentially not knowing enough about what you're doing at that point, which is why you would bring in experts to sort of guide you through that.
Should bring in experts.
So you bring the experts in that understand this and know how to get you from A to B, still give you your VM in Azure, or we're going Microsoft here, so still in Azure, but then you've got the likes of all the kind of network controls around there. You have to refactor that compared to your on-prem. It's a different. It's not sticking sort of tier 1, tier 2 firewalls and then having DMZs, etc. You've got to change your mindset when you move to the cloud, because the security controls are slightly different.
I totally agree, Ash. And there's another kind of seller for moving to the cloud, and that's to be cloud agnostic. So, rather than putting all your eggs in one basket like you would have done with a data center or maybe 2 data centers, you can now build out your products and services against multiple cloud partners. And we look at things like the cloud adoption framework. So that's like the foundations of how you should build it out, the best practices, and that's cloud agnostic as well. There's each vendor has their own ways of doing it, but they're quite similar, from the kind of basics. And secure landing zones is something that we would help consult and design and maintain for our customers, because like you say, that lift and shift, you're just moving it, but everything around it, the security, the management, is all the same. So by looking at the cloud adoption frameworks, the secure landing zones, we can help build out that cloud agnostic platform for a customer with scaling and management and security. And more importantly, it also allows our customers to be able to pick up and understand how it runs a bit better, because from that on-premise days, like I said, people have come and go and the documentation is lost. At least now with the cloud, it's all sort of standardized. Once you learn the cloud basics, you get a good understanding of how things function, how the networking connects together, how things like VDI will work in there. So it's a bit like the digital literacy. It's helping to make us more digital literate by going to the cloud.
Yeah. So I remembered what the second question was. I remembered it actually about 10 seconds after we started talking about the other thing. So the brain is still functioning. And
was it what you're having for lunch today?
Oh no, I know that. I know my meal's planned out all through the day. I can't live without that. It was, one of the arguments that we hear when we come back to that sort of pretend cloud type avenue is, the native tools version of it is it's not as good as the point solution. Is that a valid argument?
It depends. It depends on the products as well, Pete. So from an example could be that maybe you're using a VDI solution. So it's a good point, Pete, that you could be looking at maybe a VDI product and that solution that you've been using for many years. There could be newer VDI solutions which are cloud native, and of course with that comes the scalability and the security. So do you want to still stick with what you've been doing for the last 5, 6, 7 years, or do you want to start looking at these new native products that are not only more cost effective in most cases, but there's more access to those products from wherever you go, remote workers working from home, BYOD, that's all the sort of way we're moving.
One of the comparisons I used sort of recently, because I think by and large the native tools are pretty much on the mark. Then they might not have quite as many features, but if you look back to the days of Skype and Link and coming into the telephony market as potential competition for the old PBX vendors, etc. And I remember having this one delightful conversation with one of the vendors in front of a client, and they were saying, "Yes, but we've got 200 different functions that we can do on our PBX." And so you're sitting there going, "Well, I make a call, I receive a call, I put it on hold, I hang up, I check voicemail, I might forward. I'm on 6, right? So I'm 194 short at the moment, and obviously there's things like 100 and stuff, but I think for me it seems like we're in a slightly similar position of the native tools probably do the vast majority, if not all, of what the vast majority of companies need.
Of course, it's not. We're not saying everything native is right. What we're saying is that your business requirements probably can be matched by cloud native tools, and of course, if it can't,
we've got.
If it can, absolutely. We're not biased on saying you must use all these tools. We're looking at your requirements. We're looking at where you're going in the future with your business and thinking ahead on what you might need going forward, and making sure that the customers have the right products and services. And also the right cloud partner as well, more importantly. So
Oh, no,
I might be an M365 Azure guy, but I'm not saying it's perfect. And we do use the right products and the right partners for the right solution.
Wow, we are. You need to go on marketing, mate. We'll put you right front and centre with that sort of.
Yeah,
Nice
I've already
story.
put in my vacancy offer for that, Pete. So thank you.
Cool, brilliant. Well, we're pretty much at time. I think it's a good place to sort of wrap it up. It's an interesting conversation. It's always an interesting conversation, but I think it's gathering pace at quite some. Can you gather pace at quite some rate? I guess you can. Whatever. Anyway, it's gathering pace. So thank you very much, both of you. It's been a
You're
pleasure,
welcome.
as always. And of course, both new to this, so I'm sure you'll both be back when I start nagging you for additional content. But yes, that was Ricardo Meechan, otherwise known as Rico, who is our M365 in Azure, and Ash Ward, who is M365 as well. Thank you, gentlemen, both very, very much. And we will be back in 2 weeks' time with whatever the next topic is, because quite frankly, we haven't decided yet. And if you like this, please do like and share. And thank you very much.
Welcome to NasStars, the Nasstar podcast, bringing you the conversations you want to hear from the front line of tech news.